You may have seen a lot of the images online of the massive protests taking place across the Netherlands. Farmers bringing so many of their tractors and combines into the cities, unhappy with some of the potential legislation the federal government in Holland wants to bring forward. Now, to chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us now from the Foreign Desk in Los Angeles. Lisa, why are farmers in Holland so angry right now?
This is a great story of representation, exactly what governments are meant to do, and what those who are in government are supposed to do is represent the masses. Farmers were not happy with some of the legislation that would be passed. This is environmental legislation that would affect farming, if it would affect just all sorts of cattle. They wanted to go after cows. A lot of the, again, environmental regulation. Again, we're entering this era of, green, 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 but we don't talk about the consequences of that regulation and what it would do to those who are in that industry. And that's exactly what these farmers were trying to tell the government, the Dutch government. So, these scenes are amazing. You see these tractors coming onto the highways and letting people know. And exactly that. They went to vote, and they won 20% of vote, which is 15 seats, which is a very, very a significant win and a constituency where they will now have their voices heard. They will be able to vote. They will be able to be a real part of that decision making, since they are a certain segment of the population and they cared enough to come out and vote and engage in peaceful protests. And it's really a great story. The opposition, I just want to add here, very similar to what we're seeing in all parts of the world, look at this as a left versus right issue, which is interesting because, as I said, they're the farmers' coalition. Just like in the United States, you can compare it to unions, right? Teachers union, farmers union, etc. But the opposition looks at these farmers as a right-wing coalition, and look at them as extremists who might be against a lot of other regulations that they would want to pass, and be against a lot of other laws that the left deems important. So that is why there was opposition to the farmers, and again, majority rule. So they did get what they wanted in terms of constituencies.
Lisa, some of the leaked Pentagon documents, which ended up on social media, reveal that both Iran and Nicaragua discuss ways to counter U.S. influence in Latin America. What kind of countermeasures are we talking about here?
We've known about Iran's growing influence in Latin America, throughout the continent, for a very long time now. And a lot of lawmakers here in the United States have tried to bring attention to this, to say, look, the Iran regime is at our footstep, knowing that they're trying to build that kind of influence and try to have a presence there. So what the Iran regime has done is grow this influence through their proxies, Hezbollah, and also try to gain favor on the ground. They build these mosque centers and cultural centers and things like that. So the influence that they wanted to build is to curb the US's influence there, meaning to have a very pro-Iran regime, a pro-Shiite influence in Latin America, and to have an anti-American. So they get into the media, they get into newspapers, they get into schools and these cultural centers and mosque centers. So they really try to brainwash the people down in Latin America as to be pro-Iran regime. They've also gotten seats in government. You have Syrian officials, you have again, these Hezbollah officials being a part of the cultural landscape right now in many of these Latin American countries. So their presence is growing, their influence is growing, and this is something obviously to really keep an eye on in terms of the future and what the Iran regime is trying to gain just south of our border.
Absolutely. Lisa, the Air National Guardsman arrested by federal agents for allegedly leaking classified Pentagon documents faces charges of espionage. Guardsman Jack Teixeira, an IT worker, allegedly uploaded hundreds of pages of sensitive documents about the war in Ukraine into a Discord group chat.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, and it's embarrassing, to say the very least, both to our friends and enemies. I think they're looking at the United States and wondering why a 21-year-old had access to this information, and not just that, but access to spread that information, and was able to do so. Obviously, he's in the IT world and had access to very sensitive information that perhaps he shouldn't have had access to because of the vulnerability. And here we see why that went very, very bad. The fact that this information is coming out, a lot of it is embarrassing to our foreign policy and to our friends and enemies alike, to see that this kind of information can get out, and really what was going on behind the scenes. For example, that we knew the Biden administration said that this is a dire situation in Ukraine, not a war that can be won, but yet trying to convince countries like South Korea and Israel, who may have more assets than basically the ratio of what they're giving, to give more to the Ukraine war. So what gives, right? Again, here we're seeing the influence of Iran's regime in Latin America. We saw a lot of secrets about the Chinese and their influence and how they're growing. So a lot of things that shouldn't have gotten out, that again weaken our foreign policy, weaken our presence on the global stage, and just not a good look for us.
Lisa, a story by the Washington Post says that U.S. intelligence noted that recent heightened Chinese military activity will obscure their ability to pick up early warning signs of an invasion of Taiwan. Now, U.S. officials say it will be very difficult to ascertain what constitutes out of the ordinary activity, considering all of the military movements taking place by China.
Exactly. So imagine there's so many mini provocations that they will never know what constitutes a real provocation. Well, here's a little tip for the Biden administration and our military assets. These are provocations, and they all count. Meaning, if China did not have a real goal in mind and an agenda to invade Taiwan, well, then why the provocations? So if they say that they're going to do something, I would believe them. And if they are showing us through their actions that they're going to do something, why not believe them? What are we waiting for in order to really count that as an invasion or a provocation? Or what line are we drawing to actually call that a provocation? The second question then becomes, what do we do about it? Are we looking to arm Taiwan? Do we even have the assets to arm Taiwan after getting involved so deeply in the war in Ukraine with Russia's invasion there? So there's a lot of secondary questions, but I am really stuck on the primary question, which is what constitutes an invasion. Let's assume we're already there. What do we do next? And I think that that's what the U.S. government should be preparing for right now.
Let's circle back to Iran for just a moment here. Authorities in that country have shut down over 150 businesses in a 24-hour period for not following the country's strict Islamic dress code, which includes a requirement for women to wear headscarves in public. Now, Lisa, police shut down 137 shops and 18 restaurants.
Right. So that's exactly what the Iran regime has always done. They've always had, Big Brother watching, meaning, getting into neighborhoods and creating this grid-like system, meaning you don't know if your own neighbor will be spying against you and reporting you to the authorities and getting some sort of handout, or now going after these shops and restaurants and punishing them in order to have them be their watchdogs and not allow patrons to not wear their hijabs. We are seeing an active revolution in motion in Iran, with the women actually being brave enough to come out without their headscarves to do mundane things like go to school, go supermarket shopping, go to the bank, etc. So the government not being able to control this because they have already, rounded up so many, they've even executed so many of the protesters, but to get a real control over what's going on, they're now going after these small businesses to have them do the dirty work, to have them make people compliant to the rules and laws there. And again, bringing people's attention back to the catalyst that started this revolution this time around 7 months ago was the death of 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian Mahsa Amini, who was arrested and then beaten to death for her improper wear of hijab. She was wearing it very loosely and not compliant with what the Islamic government there wants them to do. So this is obviously a big sensitivity, and that therefore the women of Iran have become this icon, or the fact that women's freedom is at the forefront of this bigger freedom movement is why women are very sensitive to the hijab right now and are not wearing it as a symbol of their freedom.
Sudan's army is appearing to gain an upper hand in a bloody power struggle with rival paramilitary forces pounding their bases with airstrikes. Lisa, there are reports that 97 civilians have been killed and 365 people injured since the fighting in Sudan began.
Yeah, it's going to become bloodier and bloodier. This is picking up momentum. Not too many media outlets covering it. So I thank you, Hal, for bringing attention to it. We don't really pay attention to that part of the world, unfortunately, with Western news outlets. This is an almost civil war. This is an insurgency group that is fighting the country and the military now, as of this morning, having the upper hand. But again, those casualties are rising. Paramilitary group is not going away anytime soon. They're fighting for power. They're fighting to reseat this government, and the military is keeping up. So, of course, this is becoming very bloody, picking up again a lot of momentum, and we're keeping our eyes on that. And of course, that death toll is rising. It's rising as of last night. It grew exponentially, and we'll keep our eyes on it here at the Foreign Desk as well.
You know, something else I was keeping my eye on was a survey conducted in the fall of 2020 revealed that a large number of people under the age of 40 across North America had no idea about the basic facts surrounding the Holocaust, Lisa. The study was done by researchers with a conference on Jewish material claims against Germany.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Hal, I was having a conversation with a friend, a colleague last week, and saying, this denial of the Holocaust is going on while we still have the last generation of survivors around, and many of them being in their 90s and even over 100 years old. Now, imagine when these individuals pass away and we don't have any first-hand accounts. We don't have the witnesses and the victims who lived through it and saw the horrific parts of the Holocaust. This is modern history. We have everything documented. We have pictures. We have so much in terms of evidence. I mean, who needs to prove such a horrific, historic event that occurred? And of course, this coming on the eve of Holocaust Remembrance Day this week, where we hope that the world stops to commemorate and to say never again will hate crimes and hatred for a certain group lead to that kind of just wholesale cleansing, genocide of a people. 6 million died, and many more than that. We know that was just the Jews. We know that there were other minorities who were involved as well. It's horrific to think that Gen Z, millennials, where, education is at a point where we're pushing pronouns and rewriting history in certain cases and canceling history in so many cases. You'd think that they would remember something that wasn't even 100 years ago. So it's really sad and dangerous to think that this is where our young people are at. And I hope that this only motivates people in the place of education, whether that at the high school, middle school, college level, to really double down and to teach this material, and for groups that are out there to put this up on social media. If you see a post about Holocaust Remembrance Day, retweet that, repost that, put it up on Instagram to let people know about this horrific thing, and to say never again, not for Jews or anyone else, never again.
Lisa, the federal election is coming up next year for your country. Let's talk a bit about the fact that Joe Biden says, yep, I'm going to put my name forward as the Democratic candidate one more time. What about Donald Trump? What's the latest with the indictment charges, and where does he stand about becoming the Republican candidate once again?
It's a circus here in the United States with this particular arena, the presidential election. Look, Donald Trump right now is undergoing a lot of scrutiny in terms of his opposition going after him in formal capacities and using, and perhaps in certain cases abusing law in order to marginalize him and to diminish his chances at a presidential run. Joe Biden and the Democrats just have to remain silent. That's exactly the tactic that they have chosen, to just stay on the sidelines and perhaps win this just because if Donald Trump's on the ticket, he's hoping he'll just win by not being Donald Trump. It's interesting because we have half the country that is, in love with Donald Trump and think he was the best president that ever was. And on the other half, not really loving Joe Biden or any of his policies, not caring for Kamala Harris. I mean, their approval numbers are abysmal, but just supporting them because they do not want to support Donald Trump. So he's obviously a polarizing character, to say the very least. But we'll have to watch. We just heard this week that Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, will not be putting his name into the ring. Many others also being fearful of running in 2024 because they just don't think they can run against Donald Trump on the Republican ticket and win because of his popularity across the board. So we'll be watching this closely. We'll see how his legal affairs pan out and if that will make him more popular or less in the long run. and if he stands a chance at being the Republican nominee. And if Joe Biden's going to run against him, we'll see a rematch of what we saw 4 years ago.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. Political reporter and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, thanks again for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure. Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.